Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Barbara Ham Lee. When was the last time you had an honest conversation about race? Was it uncomfortable? Did you learn something new, or were stereotypes reinforced? Did the conversation make you rethink your own perceptions about race? In the next hour, we'll talk with diversity and inclusion expert Michelle Woods-Jones about talking about race and answer the question, why is it so hard to discuss this topic? We want you to join us at 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Another View is next, right after this news from NPR.
Discussing the issues and celebrating the successes of the African American community. This is Another View.
And happy Friday, everybody. I'm Barbara Ham Lee. Welcome to Another View. I just want to take a moment to give a positive shout out and congratulations to the Hearsay staff, Kathy and Danny and Morgan and Perry, and to Sandra Woodward, who are all up for the Virginia Association of Broadcasters Awards this evening. And so they've all been notified, and they're either in first or second place. And so we're very, very proud of their accomplishments. Congratulations. And if you will indulge me for just a moment with a personal note, this time 5 years ago, I became Mrs. Barbara Ham Lee. And so, Mr. Lee, I know you're out there listening. Happy anniversary. So, on today's show, now think about this. When President Barack Obama was elected in 2010, that was his first term in office, there was a resounding cry across the country that the United States was entering a post-racial era. It was believed by some that racial issues could be put to rest because the nation had elected its first African-American president. Instead, we find ourselves in a time where negative racial commentary runs rampant on the internet, in our homes, in popular culture, even in the workplace. So where is the disconnect, and why do we have such trouble talking about race? Michelle Woods-Jones is a counseling psychologist and executive director of the Hampton Citizens Unity Commission, which provides diversity education to individuals, businesses, schools, and other groups. And welcome to Another View. Michelle, how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Good. So we found out today that tunnel can be quite a challenge in the summertime, can it?
It can be horrendous.
Michelle,
you to have a mini heart attack.
Well, Michelle was supposed to be with us in our studios here in Norfolk, and unfortunately, the tunnel said we would have to make other arrangements. So we're glad that you were able to join us whichever way that was necessary. So, Michelle, why is it so hard for our society today to have a conversation about race?
Well, I think race is one of the most challenging topics for us as Americans because for all intents and purposes, it's a cultural construct, and it's fraught with all kinds of heavy-laden emotions, anger, guilt that make us uncomfortable. And we don't have a lot of tools. We haven't practiced, so we don't have a lot of tools that enable us to engage each other about this difficult historical, social, cultural topic that impacts American culture.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that, particularly for African Americans, there's also yet another layer, and that's kind of the intra-racial conversation that we engage in?
Exactly. We avoid that just as well. The inter and the intra-racial conversation is one that doesn't occur readily. We have a lot of guilt about those intra-racial issues around color and hair texture and level of social, educational experiences. Mm-hmm. And so because we don't have the tools, and there's a high probability to offend or at least believe that one can offend if you don't think you have the kind of language and, more importantly, the kind of trust among and between the people having the conversation. it makes it extraordinarily difficult.
Now, there are a lot of things that have been happening just within the past week or so as we put together this show. Paula Deen being deposed for a lawsuit that's been brought against her and her brother and the restaurant that they have in Georgia, where the employee said that the atmosphere was one of sexism as well as racism. And Paula was asked during the deposition if she had ever used the N-word. And her response was, it was a long time ago. Yes, I've used it, but it was a long time ago. Now, Smithfield Foods came out, which Paula is one of their spokespersons, and said, we do not tolerate discrimination of any kind. So if someone has used the word before or has had thoughts of that, does that mean that they are forever labeled a racist?
Well, racism is a learned behavior. We aren't born racist. It isn't some kind of condition that sort of takes over our being. We learn racism from the people generally who raise us, from the people we love, interactions within our faith community, within our schools, on our television, commercials, music, etc. So the fact of the matter is, racism can be unlearned. And so therefore, I think for many Americans of all different kinds of backgrounds, we have learned various prejudices and biases from our family members. And as we grow and develop and find the opportunity to interact with a wider array of human beings, we can unlearn a lot of those things that we have been taught. So, I think it's more than possible to be a recovering racist.
Recovering racist. I like that term. Do you think the role of the internet in all of this? Because we know, for example, and I want to play a clip in just a minute, but the Cheerios commercial that came out recently, let's play the clip and then we'll talk about it on the other side.
Mom.
Yes, honey?
Dad told me that Cheerios is good for your heart. Is that true?
Says here that Cheerios has whole grain oats that can help remove some cholesterol, and that's heart healthy.
Now, if you haven't seen the commercial, it is of the mother is white, the child is clearly interracial, the father is African American, and the little girl takes the Cheerios box and pours Cheerios all over her daddy's heart because she wants him to be healthy. That spot got such negative commentary on the internet that General Mills actually wound up taking the spot off the internet because of the negative backlash of showing an interracial family. When you see things like that, Michelle, as someone who works very hard to be inclusive and to diversify, what do you think about that?
Well, I think we have a lot of work still yet to be done. And I think that the internet allows a number of bullies to be able to say things that are vulgar and hurtful and mean-spirited without having to be responsible for what it is they are saying. So it gives easy access to a number of people who are saturated basically with ignorance and mean-spiritedness. And so we have within our culture individuals who still are horrified at the notion that individuals fall in love with other individuals who happen not to look exactly like them. And it becomes, almost pseudo neurotic, some kind of mental illness, because the truth of the matter is, within our culture, we have all kinds of people, and historically, certainly African Americans come in all different hues because of miscegenation. And so it just, in 2013, it becomes pathetic. However, we can't just shake our heads and say, oh my, we've got a few bad apples around who are saying things that are despicable. But we, I think, have to assume the responsibility of attempting to educate individuals and to give them tools by which they can undo those kinds of views that get in the way of them being able to live lives that are indicative of how people make choices, and who they love, where they live, where they work, and where they play.
440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240 are the numbers to call to join our conversation today. We're talking about race. 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Give us a call and join our conversation. So, Michelle, you talk about how we can unlearn being racist. What are some of the things that we need to do? How do we change this conversation?
Well, first of all, we have to be willing to have it, really be willing to have it. Not to have it just so that we can sort of shake our fingers at each other, but to be willing to put aside a lot of our sensitivities, a lot of our fears, those things that cause anxiety, and roll up our sleeves and start with the personal pronoun I. What are my views, and how is it that I have those views? What are they based on? What are the assumptions that drive my lens through which I interpret the world? And then to be willing to listen to the experiences of other people in terms of what are the genesis of their views. How did they come to believe what they believe? And then to help those individuals find and seek deeper understanding and perhaps even common ground. And when I say that, I don't mean that we sort of have this, what shall I say, this pasteurized notion of race, but that we really dig deep and say to ourselves, what is my responsibility to change this? Because if we want to alter racism in our culture, then we individually have to accept the responsibility of not being racist.
But, and that sounds really good, Michelle, and it sounds very antiseptic. But when you were really engaged in that kind of conversation, how do you then temper your own experiences, but your own emotions in terms of trying to get the other person maybe to see your side? Where do you get rid of the defensiveness so that you really can open up that conversation?
Well, one of the things we do in our training is that we provide individuals with what we call an ouch card. And if something happens in the conversation that causes your blood to boil or causes you to feel upset in some kind of way, you raise that card. And then you have the responsibility of explaining why you feel the way you feel. What is it about what transpired that hurts you, that diminishes you, that upsets you? And then to give the other person the tools. That is, for example, if you people upsets me and you keep saying it, it's my responsibility, if I want to be able to resolve the tension in our relationship and to have a better relationship with you, to say, I don't know what you mean when you say you people, but every time you say it, it makes me feel that I'm not a bona fide member of the group. What I prefer that you say is those of you who work in the secretarial pool. Then we give each other what it is that we need in order not to have to stay marred in the emotions that stifle us and make us incapable of being able to communicate with each other in ways that solve the problem.
Let me ask you a question, because and both of us are African American. Do you feel sometimes that that we as a people, and I'm generalizing here, and I understand that, but that we tend to be ultra sensitive to comments that are made that someone may make that may not be meant to be a racial comment?
Well, I have difficulty defining people's experiences. If it hurts, it hurts. And I think that what we have to do is accept the fact that something that we have said, we may not have intended it, but nonetheless, we have a role to play in clarifying it and in understanding that intent and impact are two different kinds of experiences. And so whether or not I intended it, you have been impacted in a way that has caused you to feel hurt, marginalized, etc. And I want to be open to hearing that so that I can adjust my behavior in a way as not to offend you in the past. I think what gets us in trouble is when we become offended and we don't deal with it. We become offended and we tell somebody else we're offended than telling the person who has offended us in a way they can hear it. Now, what does that mean, in a way they can hear it? Instead of attacking them, to communicate with them clearly what it is about what they said impacts you. I like to encourage people to talk in I messages as opposed to you hurt my feelings. My feelings are hurt because when I hear someone say such and such, this is how I feel. That's taking ownership and educating the other person.
Okay. Our phones are lit up, 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Terrence joins us from Norfolk. Hi, Terrence. You're on the air.
Hi, Barbara. How are you?
Okay. Go ahead.
Well, I had put a post up on Facebook about the use of the N-word, and it generated quite a bit of conversation. And you are, of course, a Facebook fan, and you invited me to call. I would say that a lot of the responses that I got, I rather anticipated, particularly one from a young dentist friend of mine who thought that the N-word was being redefined. And someone older who felt that words can only hurt us if we allow them to. But I think the most encouraging note that I got was from a former coworker of mine back in the days at the Generic Theater, who was a white male, who he and I, at one point, because of our, this was back in the 80s, because of our own upbringing, we had almost come to blows at one point. But his response to my post was, it was just being very, very honest and probably painfully honest for him. But he stated that he was raised to be racist. He was raised to be a bigot. And he recalled clearly that his father had said at one point that some of his best friends were of the N-word variety. And I found that, of course, quite a contradiction. How can someone that you define as using the N-word be a friend? But his comment was most encouraging.
Okay. Michelle, you'd like to... Terrence's post, let me just say this. The question that you asked online was, tell me, please, regardless of spelling, how can the N-word ever be acceptable? And Terrence went through to describe some of the things in history and how the word was used and how in today's society, music and culture, other cultural things, songs, stand-up comedy and so forth, that the word is constantly used, and particularly by African Americans, about African Americans. Michelle? Oh.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Well, I think, as he indicated, his friend acknowledged that he had learned these behaviors from his family members, and that's what we talked about earlier, that racism is a learned behavior. I think generationally there are different views about the N-word. Traditionalists and baby boomers often have a particular view because of their historical experiences and how that word has hurt and demeaned and belittled and been destructive to their very spirits. It reminds me somewhat when I hear younger people who are millenniums and some Generation Xers talk about the word, as many of us in my generation used to talk about the word black, which was extraordinarily offensive. A black African was a horrible word that you could use to describe an African American person at the time, and they generally were called Negroes and colored during that period. And then Stokely Carmichael took the word and took its power away. I'm black and I'm proud. So I think for many of our young people in the hip-hop generation, what they are attempting to do is to take the power away from the word, to alter it so that it doesn't offend. But it remains offensive still to many people in our communities, not just the African American communities across the board, because the word has a historical perspective that manifests itself differently based upon what your experiences have been. I don't tolerate it. I don't allow it in my home. My children were never allowed to use it. I'm offended by it, and I don't relish it at all. I do listen and attempt to understand the perspective of the younger generation when they talk about how it is that they want to alter the meaning of the word so that it becomes one of an endearment, et cetera, et cetera. But I think that, we are built based upon our total experiences, and we can't separate ourselves from that. And we respond to life based upon those experiences. So the N-word is a word that has a lot of power still, in that it can be extraordinarily destructive.
Okay, Terrence, thanks so much for the call. We appreciate it. Nick joins us from Newport News. Hi, Nick. You're on the air.
Hi. I was listening to your discussion about the Cheerios commercial. And I'm Asian and my wife is white, and we have a child together. And I was wondering if you all thought that it would be any different if it was my family in that commercial, or if somehow the fact there was an African-American person involved exacerbates the outrage that was being showed for that commercial.
Nick, before I ask Michelle to answer that, I'd like to hear your answer. What do you think?
I think it does.
So you think it makes a big difference because it was an African-American?
I think it does. I think people are more receptive to people of different races as long as they're not black. I'm not saying it's right, but I'm saying that's what happened.
Michelle?
Well, I think there's probably some truth to that. I think the opposite, the true opposite of white is black. And then there are variations in between. And I think within our culture, there are different opinions. But I don't want to go there and say necessarily that is always true, because I'm reminded of the lovely young man who had on his mariachi outfit singing the national anthem, and the horrible responses to people gave of him being a wetback and he was just a illegal immigrant, and just berated this wonderful young man who performed so beautifully and was obviously so proud to be able to sing the national anthem. But because he had on his mariachi outfit, is indicative of his culture, celebratory outfit, it was terrible, the comments that were online and on the waves. So I think that we have bigots who in our culture who are whose viewpoints are that you want to subscribe to Aryan traditions, where people are totally white on white, and any other kind of human being muddies the waters, shall we say. And they have a problem with it.
Nick, thanks so much for the call. We really appreciate it. If you're just joining us, we're talking with Michelle Woods-Jones. She's the executive director of the Hampton Citizens Unity Commission, and we're talking about race. 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240 are the numbers to call to join our conversation. Raymond joins us from Virginia Beach. Hi, Raymond. You're on the air.
How you doing?
Okay.
All right. Yeah, I could just wanted to say I think racism in America, because I've been around the world, is almost becoming a business. And it seems like in the news every 2 months you can set your clock to it. You're going to hear something racially charged. Not to say that we don't have a problem, but I think the media, excluding NPR, your public radio, but the media is just taking this. When they don't have a story, they go with something racially charged.
So are you saying that they should not report it because it is racially charged, or are you saying that that something racially charged happens that they report on?
I mean, like the thing about the woman who cooks, whatever her name is, Dean in Georgia, saying
Paula
the
Dean,
N-word,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
you know, some years ago. I'm like, come on, please. I mean, like, I know good people that are white that have used the word, slipped up. I mean, I know people that use it because they heard it in a song. I mean, and I understand there's different ways of using it, but I think most of us that have some age under us and some experience are not going to deem anybody just because they use the word one time in their life a racist because of that.
So you're much more tolerant in terms of that, in looking at the whole person as opposed to just that one comment that they may make. Okay, let's let Michelle. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I've been in a lot of places. I have a lot of white coworkers and had white girlfriends before. You would really be surprised how well some other white people defend you for something minor. You know, another white person might say something or mean something that's a little racially charged, and I've seen white women and white guys like straight up defend me when I didn't think I needed any defending from anything.
Okay, let's let Michelle join in on the conversation. Michelle?
Well, you know, I think there's a spectrum of responses about things that might be perceived as racist or may in fact be racist. And I think it's really risky business when you define an individual's total value as a human being based upon the use of a word years ago. The question, though, where Paula Dean is concerned, is whether or not this was, in fact, a long time ago, or if the allegations of this employee who's disgruntled is indicating that these are more current kinds of experiences. And, you know, the bottom line is disappointment for a lot of people. Here we have individuals in our culture who have risen to a level of esteem and respect because of their talents and abilities, etc. And then to discover that they may be behaving in ways that demonstrate a total a lack of information, a total lack of socialization and cultural awareness and multicultural competence. It's just, you know, it's disappointing. It hurts individuals. Anger is, to a large extent, about hurt and fear. And I think that very often people scurry to say, oh, God, here it is again. Mm-hmm. Here we are, 2013. By the way, Barbara, you mentioned at the beginning of the show mm-hmm. how there are individuals after Barack Obama's election in 2010 rallied to say that we were now post-racial. Mm-hmm. And I think that in itself is an indication of how far we have to go. Because the fact that people beat their breasts that Barack Obama is the first African-American president is questionable in my head. Is he any more African-American than he is European-American? He was raised by his grandparents who have no experience in the African-American community. His background in growing up and developing, honing his characteristics, views, and values were developed in a culture very separate and different from African-American. So what makes one African-American in this culture? Are we still the one drop rule? Is he any more African-American than he is anything else? Is he our first multicultural president? Is he our first actively mixed-race president? So it's interesting that we think that the fact that Barack Obama is our president, and I voted for him twice, is somehow our first African-American. What does it mean in our culture to be African-American?
Wow, that gives us a lot to think about, Michelle, in terms of what you're saying. And I wonder, as you talk with people in your groups, if that discussion comes up, and what are their responses to it?
They have many responses to it, and it does come up because we have a tendency in our culture to classify people, to put them in silos, and as a result of where we place them, then based on our assumptions, we determine who we believe them to be. For example, a news commentator asked who was the most famous Italian catcher of Italian descent, and no one thought about Roy Campanella, whose mother was Italian and father was African American. So we have a tendency, and I think this is a part of the dilemma that we have in America around race. We have a tendency to categorize people based upon our perceptions of what we see in them, and those internal dimensions of diversity are where we find ourselves drawing conclusions and identifying who we think people are.
440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Joe joins us from Surrey County. Hi, Joe. You're on the air.
Hi, Barbara, and the wonderful show you have as always.
Thank you so much.
And I think that I am very supportive of the ad that the Cheerios people had on. America has been and still is a multiracial society, a multicultural society, and if it would encourage them to put that ad back on TV, I'm going out today and buy a ton of Cheerios.
Joe, thanks so much for the call, and hello to all of our great fans, Another View fans out there in Surrey County. We really appreciate your support. Thanks so much for calling. Take care. And Liz joins us from Yorktown. Hi, Liz. You're on the air.
Hi, yes. Another Cheerios caller, I guess. I have to say, when that controversy first came up, that all I heard the news say was that because of a lot of calls, uproars that this had caused, Cheerios was pulling the ad. And I assumed, this just goes to show you how much I thought that the world had changed, I assumed that the uproar against the black male and the white female being married was from blacks calling in, being upset that the black male was married to a white woman and not another black woman. I did not assume that the calls were by white people being upset by it. So I guess I'm really naive, or I live in another world where I thought it had changed. I didn't think the calls were by white people.
Wow, that's interesting. Michelle, you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, that is an
That's
interesting
very
perception.
interesting perspective. Yeah.
Yes, and I'm almost a little bit speechless because it's a different view than I would have subscribed to, but I think very valid, because there are, in fact, many African American people who strongly prefer that their family members and loved ones and people they admire marry other African American people. And so I assume that it is more than possible that Cheerios may have received calls from both directions. My belief system, based on experience, is that probably wasn't the case, but I wouldn't rule out that there weren't some calls. I've certainly heard in my classes from students who are African Americans telling stories of their parents demanding that their brothers leave the house with their white girlfriends and not bring them back ever again. So we certainly know that there are both black and white families and other cultural families who prefer that their family members, friends, and loved ones marry people who are in their own racial category.
Liz, thanks so much for that call. We appreciate that. Michelle, that is a very good point that you bring up, because there is conversation in some pockets of the African American community that there's this belief that black people cannot be prejudiced, that it all comes on us as opposed to our also extending those types of feelings sometimes.
Yes. Well, unfortunately, race in America has had a negative impact on all of us. And how we respond to what has happened to us drives the views that we have. I remember one woman in a class saying that she understood, even though she didn't subscribe to her father's feelings, she understood given what he had experienced. And he had been belittled and hadn't been promoted and couldn't find a job for years, and because he was black. And he was an extremely talented man, held high positions in his church and so forth, but always felt diminished by the fact that he had been so mistreated by white people. Consequently, he didn't care much for them, and certainly didn't want his son to marry a white person. So yeah, we've all been negatively impacted by the impact of race in this culture.
Let me ask you this, Michelle, because sometimes I get this comment from people. If we celebrate in any group, but I'm talking about African Americans because that's what our show focuses on. But if we celebrate our differences and we want to talk about issues from our perspective, we have been criticized here at Another View sometimes that we are creating a separation as opposed to what our goal is, which is to educate and bring information to everyone so that we can be more inclusive as opposed to exclusive. So I wonder what your thought is on that when people say to us, no, because you focus on African Americans, you're being separate as opposed to being inclusive.
Well, I'm perplexed by that, and I have suspicions about that view, because we don't say that when we celebrate Columbus Day or Cinco de Mayo or Oktoberfest, so I'm perplexed by that. I think it's important that we celebrate each other's cultural experiences so that we can see ourselves in each other, experience ourselves in each other. I grew up in a little small village about 100 miles south of San Francisco called Pacific Grove, and I know how to say naughty words and folk dance in about 20 different cultures because we all grew up together, and it was important that we celebrated and learned about each other, because that was a part of being able to negotiate life effectively together. So I'm uncomfortable with the notion that to celebrate and to share who I am and what makes me proud about my background and to want to share that with you is somehow separating you from me. I see it as an opportunity to embrace and include.
Well, that's what we intended the show to do. So, and I'm glad we're having this conversation today. David joins us from Chesapeake. Hi, David. You're on the air.
Hi, Barbara.
Hi.
And hello to your guest. Thanks for taking my call.
Thank you.
I got a question for your guest, but I wanted to hit real quickly on a couple things. One, the Cheerios commercial. I think that one of the issues that people have with that is that if it was you have a black person that's dressed up, well-to-do, with a white person and a kid. I think that if it was somebody that wasn't as well-to-do, or if it was a white person that was more well-to-do with a black woman, that it would have been taken a little bit differently. I think it's because it doesn't necessarily represent, at least in my 46 years, I haven't really seen, someone, in a majority in that kind of representation for that typical, for that type of family. The thing about the N-word, I think you have a situation where, you have the derogatory part of it using the ending ER, and then you have, I think was explained earlier, where you have the AS version, on the ending where it's used in songs and things like that, and just in general talking amongst, the same color, skin, and what have you. But I think my question here is for your guest is, here in the United States, we have all of this diversity being, trying to, educating people on diversity and what have you, and the use of those different words, one ending in ER and one ending in AS. But yet the rest of the international communities, all the different countries have for years and years and years, and it's part of their language, whether it's Italian, Latin, Romanian, Bulgarian, and so forth. All of them use some form of, say, negro or negre,
okay.
Say negra. So,
we
things
we
like
got
that.
it, David. We got exactly where you're going with this. And let Michelle answer, because I don't want to run out of time, and I want to give her a chance to answer. So go ahead, Michelle. In terms of, he's talking about internationally.
Well, if you know foreign languages and the Latin of what black is, of course, you understand negro. But we're not talking about international language here. We're talking about a word that has a history. And the word, the history of the word has not been uplifting or positive or encouraging, has not been an indication of bringing people together in any fashion. It has been a word that has diminished, destroyed, hurt, and abused individuals over time. And so I think to separate the historical context from which this word arises within our culture is to miss the point. That is the point. That's why it hurts. That's why it's filled with so much power, and people respond to it in the way they do. It's because of its history, the use of it historically within this culture.
Let's see if we can get a couple more calls. And Becky joins us from Portsmouth. Hi, Becky. You're on the air.
Hi. Thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
I wanted to address the issue you were talking about earlier about Barack Obama as African American. I think today in this society, I know I'm American, and I'm in the military. I have traveled all around the world. And when I go to other countries, they go by nationality. You can see a black person, and I say, "Hey, you're black, right? How does it feel to be black in England?" I'm not black. I'm Jamaican, or I'm South African, or They go strictly by their nationality. But here in America, they go by race. You're black. Even if you're mixed race, you're still black. You have to choose. Why can't we all just be American? And it really bothers me. I'm black. I'm African American. I put that on paperwork. But at the end of the day, I am American, and I wish the day where we could just embrace that and not feel any less black, if I could put it that way.
Becky, thank you so much for that call. I want Michelle to respond to you.
Well, I concur with the caller. First of all, I want to say that I think each of us has a God-given right to identify ourselves, who we are, and determine for the world, whoever we believe ourselves to be. I believe myself to be an American of African descent. I believe that my family contributed historically, and my larger family in terms of my culture, to the building of this country as every other group. And so I consider myself an American of African descent. I often say of African and island descent because my father came to America. Well, actually, his ancestors came to the Americas from Africa to the islands. And so he is originally from the Bahamas. So I think we get to define ourselves based upon who we believe ourselves to be. And I think the definitions here in America of breaking people down by race is a part of our challenge as Americans. It is our need to classify people in ways that make us comfortable in our own views, whether it is uplifting people or having prejudices about them. And it's a part of the need for that conversation.
So, Michelle, can you give us something that each of us could do or think about in terms of this conversation about race that we could purport within ourselves if we are determined to change the conversation to a positive one? What is something that each of us could do as an individual to try to make this country come together better around race?
Well, as I said earlier, it's my belief that problem solving starts with the personal pronoun I. And I think that each of us as individuals have to take a very careful look at ourselves and our values and our views and our behavior and ask ourselves, in what ways are we acting out that establish barriers that disconnect with other individuals, that get in the way of us being willing to be open to hear and to educate, to recognize that we are all in this together and that we're not infallible and that we can grow and we can change and we can come together as a country. Mm-hmm. But I think it starts with each individual. So often when you hear people talk, they talk about they and we. But I think it starts with me, the personal pronoun I.
Mm-hmm. So if people wanted to take your classes at the Hampton Unity Commission, tell us a little bit about how they would get involved.
Oh, we'd love to have them. We have been in operation now for almost 11 years.
Mm-hmm. As a matter of fact, Another View received its very first award from the Hampton Unity Commission, so we're very proud of that.
Yes, and we're delighted that you received that award. We have our Unity Awards every year in which we identify individuals across the Hampton Roads area who we believe contribute to the conversation. Mm-hmm. So our Hampton Diversity College is an 8-week course, and what we enable people to learn right away is that diversity is much wider and has far more breadth than just gender and race. But there are many aspects of our differences that impact how we interact with each other. So we have, general classes on what is diversity, Diversity 101, our preferences in terms of our personalities, how we work, how we play, generational, gender, disability, race, ethnicity, cultural diversity.
You cover the whole gamut. Is there a website very quickly that you can give us before we run out of time? Go ahead.
www.hampton.gov/unity.
Fantastic. Michelle Woods-Jones, you were fabulous. Thank you so much for joining us today.
And, thank you for having me.
We will have you back soon, okay?
Thank you.
All right, take care.
Bye.
And
Bye-bye.
We'll be right back.
What? How you living? What? How you living? And live in color.
It is Sammy A.
Hey, this is Tommy Davis. You're listening to Another View on 89.5 FM.
You brought me here from that big golden nugget in the sky, and I love you for your magical ways. I've got high hopes. I've got high hopes.
Tommy Davidson, always great comedy from him. 17-year-old Lisa Fierce is not your ordinary high school graduate. For the past 7 years, Lisa and her family have been homeless, but she refused to allow her circumstances to hinder her goals. Lisa recently graduated valedictorian from her Georgia high school, which threw her into the national spotlight. She took some time away from her busy schedule, working a full-time job, appearing on national talk shows, and gearing up for her first year of college to talk to our Lisa Godley.
When the school bell rings and the day is over, most high school students go to a place they call home. For Charles Drew High School's valedictorian, Lisa Fierce, this was not the case. In her graduation speech, she revealed to her peers that she'd been homeless since middle school.
My family slept on mats on the floor, and we were lucky if we got more than one full meal a day. Getting a shower, food, and clean clothes was an everyday struggle.
When Lisa and her family weren't living out of her mother's car, they were moving from one shelter to the next. Studying for exams proved to be more than challenging.
I had to open my book and use the cell phone because they shut the lights off at 8 o'clock. So
she says her mother, Renita, influenced her development by always challenging her to try her hardest.
Well, she was the one who taught me how to read at an early age, so she kept us focused on school and made sure academics was up. And she's like, a B is unacceptable, so she always pushed us to work our hardest. And she really taught me to stick to my morals and never go against what I believe in.
Renita knows how tough life can be because it was her battle with cancer that resulted in the family losing their home.
A long time coming, but I know.
In addition to her mom, Lisa's high school guidance counselor, Ms. Killen, also played a major role in Lisa's life.
Well, my counselor, Miss Killen, she's always helped me. Like, she helped me get into college. She's been helping me this whole way through.
Chalisa graduated from Charles Drew High School with a GPA of 4.529.
I just feel like if I study now, then I won't have to live like this later on in my life. So I just chose to study so that I can make a better life for my family when I get older.
In the fall, she'll be entering Atlanta's Spelman College with 60 college credits, making her a junior. She plans to study chemistry and philosophy with hopes of one day becoming an oncologist.
Well, my mom had cancer, so I decided to study oncology so no one had to go through the same thing I went through.
To those students who may be considering dropping out of high school, Chalisa offers this advice.
I would definitely tell them to get some help from someone like a tutor or even a mentor. Find a mentor to help them throughout the process.
She reminds us all to persevere no matter how difficult things become.
God will never put you through anything that you cannot handle. He will always have your back and carry you through every step of the process. So never feel like you have to give up.
And she leaves us with this quote from Gandhi.
Live as if you are to die tomorrow and learn as if you are to live forever.
For Another View, I'm Lisa Godley.
Yet even more proof that you can do what you need to do if you put your mind to it. This story was produced by Another View intern Lauren Horton, a senior at Old Dominion University. Time now for things to view and do in Hampton Roads.
You will be my Saturday love.
The second annual Blueberry Jam Music Festival is tonight and tomorrow, June 21st and 22nd, at Drury Farms in Wakefield. It's a celebration of natural foods, local musicians, and artisans. I served as MC last year, and it was a great time for the entire family. Visit druryfarms.com for details. The NBA Finals are over, but there's plenty of basketball in Hampton Roads. The Seven Cities Pro-Am Men and Women's League basketball kicks off on Saturday, June 22nd at 1:30 at Maury High School in Norfolk. Admission is free. Call 729-6772 to find out more. Universal Soul Circus comes to town June 25th through 30 at the Gallery at Military Circle in Norfolk. Showtimes vary and tickets are available. Call 1-800-745-3000 for more information. The U.S. Fleet Force's brass band will perform on Thursday, June 27th at 7 p.m. at Continental Park in Fort Monroe. It's a part of the Music by the Bay series. It's free and open to the public. Bring your lawn chairs and picnic baskets and come enjoy the music. And the Hampton Roads Juneteenth VA Festival will be held on Saturday, June 29th from 10 until 7 at Bennett's Creek Park in Suffolk. Come enjoy arts and crafts, live music, storytelling, African drumming, and a lot more in this celebration of freedom. Call 932-0101 for more. These and other events are on our website, anotherviewradio.org. You can also sign up for our eView newsletter, a once-a-week reminder of upcoming programs. And if you'd like to listen to the podcast of today's show, go to WHRV.org, click on 89.5, and then on podcasts. I'm on vacation for the next 2 weeks, so Lisa Godley will be in the interview chair. Next week, it's Another View on Health with Dr. Keith Newby talking about colorectal and prostate cancer. For producer Morgan Chase sitting in for Lisa Godley, audio engineer Perry Smith, Anastasia Champ, who answered our phones, I'm Barbara Ham Lee. Have a fantastic weekend, and let's get together again next Friday at noon for Another View.